The United States finds itself at a monumental crossroads, a moment where economic policy and constitutional law collide with explosive force. Today, on September 29, 2025, the nation is bracing for a Supreme Court showdown that could redefine the powers of the presidency and unleash a financial shockwave of up to $1 trillion. At the heart of this storm are the sweeping tariffs enacted by President Donald Trump, a signature policy that has reshaped global trade and touched the lives of every American. These tariffs, intended as an economic weapon to protect American industry, now face a fundamental legal challenge to the very authority to impose them without explicit consent of Congress. This is more than a political debate or a dry legal argument in the hallowed halls of the Supreme Court. The stakes could not be higher. It has real-world consequences for businesses struggling with supply chains, for families watching the prices of everyday goods climb, and for the health of the American economy. A lower federal court has already delivered a stunning rebuke, declaring the bulk of these tariffs illegal. Now the 9 justices have fast-tracked the case, signaling its urgency and gravity. Their decision will shape trillions in trade and draw a critical line in the sand about separation of powers. Between $750 billion and $1 trillion have been collected. If the court upholds the ruling, refunds of historic magnitude could follow. This program will unpack the law, the economics, the arguments, and the stakes. At its core, a tariff is simply a tax on imported goods. For much of American history, tariffs raised revenue and protected fledgling industries. President Trump revived this tool on an unprecedented scale, making it the centerpiece of an America First agenda. His team argued unfair deals hollowed out manufacturing, sending jobs overseas and creating massive trade deficits. Tariffs were the lever to force changes abroad, particularly in China, lowering barriers and leveling the playing field. Beyond steel and aluminum, tariffs hit electronics, machinery, clothing, and furniture, covering about $2.2 trillion in imports, roughly 69% of U.S. goods imports. The goal? Make foreign goods pricier, boost domestic production, and create jobs. The legal basis leaned on statutes, notably the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, asserting unfair practices were a national emergency enabling decisive action. Supporters called tariffs a necessary correction to a rigged system, the only tool powerful enough to break decline. Opponents countered they were blunt and costly, disrupting supply chains, inviting retaliation, slowing growth, setting up a monumental legal test of presidential authority. The first major blow came from the U.S. judiciary. In a landmark 7-4 decision, the Federal Circuit ruled most of the tariffs illegal. It directly challenged the administration's broad view of its authority. The court emphasized that tariffs are taxes and a core congressional power vested exclusively in the legislative branch. Shockwaves hit Washington and Wall Street, clouding the trade agenda. Reading the law narrowly, the court found the administration exceeded powers under IEPA. It was not intended as a blank check for sweeping, across-the-board tariffs. A president cannot declare an economic emergency and usurp Congress's taxing power. Trade groups argued the tariffs were economically damaging and unconstitutional. The decision validated their case. Billions already collected were cast under a legal shadow, teeing up a Supreme Court review that could force dramatic policy reversal and raise explosive refund questions. The question dates to the founding: who has the power to tax and regulate commerce? The Constitution's answer is crystal clear. Congress shall lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises and regulate commerce with foreign nations. Skeptical of concentrated power, the framers put the purse in the legislature's hands. Congress has delegated limited tariff adjustment authority for narrow cases like national security or unfair practices. Critics say the administration stretched delegated authority beyond limits, effectively rewriting trade policy, usurping Congress's role. After Loper-Bright, 2024, courts give less deference to agencies on ambiguous laws. The justices are more willing to say the executive overstepped. This tariff case is larger than trade. It's a defining test of the balance between president and Congress. A ruling for the administration could expand unilateral economic power. A ruling affirming Congress would reassert the legislature's constitutional role for generations. The Supreme Court expedited review, scheduling arguments for November 5, 2025, a clear sign of urgency. Typically years in the making, this case raced forward because uncertainty is untenable. Every day without a decision adds instability for businesses, markets, and the federal budget. Treasury Secretary Bessent warned continued collections could later be illegal, creating a ticking time bomb of refunds approaching $1 trillion. refunds would blow a hole in the budget, forcing cuts, tax hikes, or massive new debt. The administration argues denying tariff authority risks economic catastrophe and weakens U.S. leverage abroad. Importers, manufacturers, and the government operate in limbo. Fast tracking acknowledges a real-time crisis demanding clarity now. $1 trillion, the high-end estimate the Treasury might have to refund if the tariffs are unconstitutional. Importers paid these duties. The government booked them as revenue to fund the budget. Secretary Bessent pegs exposure between $750 billion and $1 trillion unprecedented. Refunding means tracing every payer and every dollar, an immense logistical challenge. Businesses could see a cash windfall. The federal government would face a severe fiscal shock. With funds already allocated, Washington would choose: cut spending, raise taxes, or issue debt. Returning private capital could spur investment, expansion, and hiring, but fiscal stress might spike rates, rattle markets, pressure the dollar, and reverberate through global finance. While the legal debate rages in Washington, the economic effects are felt on Main Street and in households across the country. Tariffs are taxes, and costs are passed to consumers as higher prices. According to the Tax Foundation, that's nearly $1,300 per household in 2025. The costs hit groceries, clothing, cars, and electronics. When a company pays a 25% duty on a part, it gets baked into the shelf price. Penn Wharton projects U.S. GDP down 8% and wages down 7%, with a typical middle-income household losing about $58,000 in lifetime wealth. The OECD cut U.S. growth to 2.8 in 2024, 1.8 in 2025, and 1.5 in 2026. If slower growth persists, the economy could be $2.2 trillion smaller by 2035. Tariffs may raise over $5.2 trillion in a decade, but modeled damage is larger, uniquely disruptive via distorted supply chains and retaliatory spirals. Despite the appeals court ruling and mounting evidence of harm, President Donald Trump remains resolute and defiant. He demanded an expedited Supreme Court ruling, framing the stakes in stark terms. "If you take away tariffs, we could end up being a third-world country," he warned, casting tariffs as an essential weapon. The administration argues tariffs promote peace and unprecedented prosperity, generate revenue, and support American workers. Trump linked market drops to the ruling, saying, "The stock market's down because of that, because the stock market needs the tariffs." He sees tariffs as leverage to force fair deals and correct imbalances, a nationalist vision of a protected, self-reliant economy. This pits economists, legal scholars, and businesses against a president asserting decisive executive power in the face of threats. The Supreme Court's decision is a fork in the road. It will rule on the legality of nearly $1 trillion in taxes and either expand or curtail presidential power. A win for the administration shifts power toward unilateral tariff action under emergencies. A loss reasserts Congress's control of the purse and trade. Upholding the lower court could unwind the tariff regime and require refunds up to $1 trillion. Beneath the headlines, executive ambition versus constitutional limits, protection versus free trade, government needs versus citizens' rights. 9 justices must now decide. Their ruling will be a landmark, shaping America's economic future and the balance of power. The future of trade and the balance of power hangs in the balance.